Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Language Arts Gallery. Today, we're going to continue with our academic writing instruction, and we're going to talk about responding to a writing prompt that asks us to discuss the pros and cons of a particular issue, and then to evaluate that issue based on those pros and cons. So let's get started.
So when we're discussing the pros and cons of a particular topic, this is often referred to as a discussion essay. So I want to look at two different prompts because when we're responding to a writing prompt, we always want to make sure that our writing answers the question that's being asked or it addresses the prompt. So here we start with where problems surrounding unequal access to education exist, online learning serves as a potential solution. Now let's look at two different prompts. The first says, do you believe online education is a good substitute for brick and mortar schools? Support your opinion in a well-developed essay. When I look at do you believe, I know that I'm being asked for my opinion. So I'm going to be asked to write a 5-paragraph opinion essay here. The second prompt is a little bit different. It says, discuss the pros and cons of online learning, and then evaluate the effectiveness of online education as an alternative to brick and mortar schools. Remember, we already talked about language for evaluation, and we're going to put that to use here when we write our discussion essay. So, how will we approach each topic differently? Well, let's take a look. Okay, the first one is asking for our opinion. So this is simply an opinion essay, right? We would state our opinion in the thesis statement, and then we would support that with 3 body paragraphs. The second prompt is asking us to discuss those pros and cons and then make an evaluation. So let's look at how we would approach the body paragraphs of our discussion essay. Okay, there are a couple different approaches that we can take, but I want to start with the easiest. Okay, for our introduction, first, we want to let our reader know that we're going to be discussing pros and cons. Remember, this is what we call our thesis map or our roadmap. We're letting our reader know where we're going in our essay. And then we've got our thesis statement, which is essentially our evaluation of the pros and cons. Okay, and if we go back here and we take a look at what we're being asked, it says, evaluate the effectiveness of online education as an alternative to brick and mortar schools. So our thesis statement is going to be based on that. We're going to say online education is an effective alternative to brick and mortar schools, or online education is not an effective alternative to brick and mortar schools. Okay, that's going to be the argument in our essay. Then we're going to have 2 body paragraphs. Remember, this is the simplest approach. So we're going to start with either the pros or the cons in the first body paragraph. And the second body paragraph is going to discuss whatever we didn't discuss here in the first body paragraph. So you might choose to first address the pros and then address the cons. Our conclusion is where we're going to tell our reader that the pros outweigh the cons, or vice versa, the cons outweigh the pros. And that should line up with our thesis statement. Okay, so we're going to take a look at that in just a moment. Whatever side we choose, whatever side we agree with, we should discuss that last before our conclusion. Okay, now, why would we do this? This is what writers call emphatic order. Okay, if we're emphasizing the disadvantages or the cons, then we want to address that second. Okay, and then we're coming to that in our conclusion where we're saying that the cons outweigh the pros, or the advantages are not justified by the risks. Okay, and we can see that example here. Okay, you want to emphasize the side of the argument that you are agreeing with. Okay, so let's take a look at an example here. Okay, when we look at our first body paragraph, okay, we've got a good hook. Okay, it says, in a world filled with new fad diets, many people are looking for a quick way to get healthy. So we're addressing a different topic here, of course, right? We're addressing fad diets. Okay, so we've got our hook. We're letting the reader know that we're going to be discussing pros and cons. And then we've got our thesis statement, which is, it is not a substitute for a healthy diet. Okay, so first, the author discusses the benefits. Next, the author discusses the drawbacks. Okay, and then finally, in the conclusion, he says there are both benefits and drawbacks, but he restates that thesis. The risks associated with intermittent fasting do not justify the benefits. Okay, so he's evaluating this approach to dieting based on the pros and cons. Okay, so there are some other different approaches we can take. That first approach is the easiest. Okay, here's another discussion essay, and this one is on intermittent fasting again. Okay, so here again in the first body paragraph, the author is addressing the advantages, right? So our introduction and conclusion are essentially the same. Okay, in the first body paragraph, we've got our advantages. The second, we've got our disadvantages. But now we've got a third body paragraph right here. Okay, and here the author is devoting an entire paragraph to an evaluation of the topic. So that's another way you can approach this. You can start with the pros, then the cons, and then move to an evaluation. Okay, and there's one more approach, and this is a little bit more difficult. Okay, so this is very similar to a point-by-point comparative essay. We're going to be talking about the pros and cons of a particular topic. Here we're going back to online learning. Okay, and we're discussing each topic in its own body paragraph. So here we're talking about flexibility. And we're talking about the pros and cons of online learning where flexibility is concerned. In the second body paragraph, we're talking about costs. And in the third, we're talking about credibility. And we're discussing the pros and cons related to each of those 3 points. Okay, so that is a little bit more difficult. If you've never written a discussion essay and you've never done point-by-point comparative writing, it might be easiest to stick to one of the first 2 approaches.
Okay, thank you guys so much for joining me for this video on the discussion essay. And please make sure that you like, subscribe, and comment on the video. And I will be addressing future genres of academic writing in our coming videos.